Let's talk about how to actually change your life in 2024. It's 1st of January. It's quite a good time to talk about this. And I just had this thought, right? Change actually only comes away in two ways, in my opinion. Okay. The first way is the drastic way. There's a kind of big pain in your life, or like an ego death, or a big failure, or an unbearable situation that you must get away from, and it forces you to make a change and reinvent yourself. And then that new self is consolidated by the fear of running away from this situation, right? The other way change occurs is in the long run, where over a very long period of time and gradual practice and bit by bit change, you reach a kind of tipping point and a critical point where like change has already happened, and you look back and you're like, oh my God, I've like changed. I only just realized now. So it's very like drastic or very long term. I don't want to say which one is better right now. I don't even know which one is better in the case of changing your life. But when you see it this way, it's quite interesting, because the reason most people fail to change is because they're in this middle ground. There's no big pain, there's no big ego death to run away from for the drastic change, and there's not enough longevity and the grit to stay long term to make a change actually happen. So most people are like wanting change in a medium kind of way, in a mellow way, right? Like without affecting anything currently in their life, without going through any shame or suffering or failure, without trying for like 5 6 years. They want something like kind of mellow, kind of doable. It's not going to screw up their self-image. Everyone's still going to like them, but then over like a year, they're changed, right? This is like the psychology of New Year resolutions, right? And it doesn't work because change doesn't come about in those two ways. Real change I'm talking about. So let me break this down. Let's break them down. I'm going to give you an example of some of the changes that happened to me, and a lot of young guys watching this will resonate with this, right? So most young guys make big changes to their life or their personality or just their own self, basically, following a painful breakup or following the end of a relationship that actually like meant a lot. So in my first relationship, which was more than 10 years ago, I was cheated on by my first girlfriend. And you can imagine that this was like a pretty big hit to the system. And I think it was basically an ego death, because I'd had a fairly easygoing life throughout my early teens and everything. I was fairly popular in school. I was, in the sports teams and all this kind of stuff. So I had a good sense of like self-esteem and friends. And then suddenly this happens when I get to university, and it kind of takes the floor from underneath me. I start feeling like, how could this happen to me? I felt a lot of shame, felt a lot of guilt and anger and resentment, but the pain was my own, right? There was no one to come and feel the pain for me. There was no one to come and save me from trouble by, I don't know, like financially saving me or whatever. It was just purely the pain that is your own that you must go through. And a lot of guys that have gone through this, or maybe girls as well that have gone through this, you'll know this. And this usually sparks the first like desire for genuine change. Now it's interesting why this happens is because when you get rejected by a girl, or when you leave a relationship, a lot of psychological things are going on, and it runs right to the core of your being and your genetic code. If you're rejected by the opposite sex, or you're considered undesirable by the opposite sex, your bloodline dies with you. Your genes end. And you might be like, oh, who cares? But your like whole genetic makeup, the reason you exist, cares about that. So When something like that happens, like the end of a relation, you feel like, oh my God, if I don't evolve, if I don't change, I'm screwed. My bloodline ends with me, right? It sounds dramatic, but it's literally how that's why it hurts like deep. It doesn't even hurt like on the head, it hurts like in the chest, gut, right? That's why it's happening. So, usually following a breakup of some sorts, young guys, it's their first sense of pain that is truly their own. It's not daddy can't come and save you with the money or whatever, right? Or like insurance isn't gonna come solve that shit. It's just purely your own pain that you have to deal with. And following that, I think that was when I truly actually started my fitness journey, like actually hitting the gym properly, and actually getting into self improvement and trying to improve my social skills and things. Like I'd always been kind of into self improvement because of my upbringing. But I think that was the critical moment where I was like, you know what? I'm going to be much more like outgoing in a way. And when I do these like MBTI tests, like MBTI is so popular in Korea. And I did this test and I come out as like ENTP, right? Which apparently means I'm a robot or whatever. But anyways, I actually consider myself like an introvert as well, like because I like being alone. I don't I was quite shy growing up. I wasn't the one to raise my hand and like like, but then I had all these kinds of friends around me. So I feel like I'm a 50% I, 50% E. But that was probably the moment where I was like, I need to develop the E side of my personality. I need to be more outgoing and become more social in a way where I put myself out there. Um, so in this sense, I changed. I changed my personality to cope with the pain. I changed who I am following the pain and the death of my previous ego, right? I mean, we can go real deep about this, but that's not the point of this video, so let's move on. So, when you go through this, let me give you another example. Then many years later, following many more relationships and breakups of all kinds, I end up in Milan, and some of you might know this story. I'm doing a PhD. It's a job that it's a path that is not mine. Okay, I'm actually deeply fearful of what my life will become if I go to the Korean military, which is compulsory for Korean males, and I'm trying to run away from this dragon, this big fear I have in my life. And so I'm in Milan and doing this PhD when I know it's not my path. And my health is deteriorating. I become, semi-obese. I have chronic back pain. I have anxiety, waking up with sweats like in the middle of the night, living a bad lifestyle, and I'm sharing a room with these guys, like, and it was a bad moment in my life. Now I look back and but even in that bad day to day, I remember I was studying like sales and online marketing and business and these kinds of things because I wanted to make an app and make big money with an app. So like even in this like crappy period, like I'm sitting in this like shared room on the stinky table, just like drawing like user interfaces for $1 million app idea that I have, I think. And I'm presenting this as my PhD proposal, and then my professor's like, dude, you want to do a startup, make an app as your PhD? Like, like that's not possible. Okay. Also, we're in Italy. We don't do that kind of stuff. And all this is happening, and I'm just, I'm just anxious for my life. Like I don't. And then it gets so bad, the back pain, and the whole situation gets so bad. It gets to a critical decision point. There's a point, and I decide, okay, I'm gonna quit the PhD. I'm gonna run directly towards the thing I've been running away from, which is the military. And you know what? Since I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it in the Marines, because why not? Just make it hard, right? And I'm just gonna go, and then whatever comes afterwards, I'm gonna do it. I'm just gonna figure it out, right? And going to the military, Like, can you imagine, like, a guy who's lived most of his life in Europe, very bohemian, very hippie, very party like, and then suddenly going into the military with 20-year-olds when I'm 28, into the Marines where they're famous for bullying and all this kind of stuff, and just feeling like, how can a state take years of my life, and all these, just like, it was another ego death. See this theme that comes up, right? There's another ego death. There's another death of the previous me so that a new me can emerge. Okay. And following the military that gave the break that I needed, I was able to come out and start like trying out YouTube videos and making content and trying to make a business. And if I didn't go to the military, perhaps I would have never made that leap, right? That break, that painful ego death period where I could reinvent and be reborn would never have existed. So I could go on and on with stories that show this, but basically those two are very critical moments in my life. And I want you to take this from this story, this idea that if you're going through a hard time right now, whether it's in your family, your job, your relationships, maybe you're in a city, trapped in a city that you don't want to be in. Maybe you're in a relationship where somebody's abusive. Maybe you're going through a really hard time because like every friend is moving ahead and you don't know what you're going to do with your life. Maybe you feel stuck in your body because it's obese or skinny and you just hate yourself, but you don't know how to change. Like, whatever pain, the more unbearable the change is, the more hard it is, you have to realize that it's going to sound really messed up, but this is actually your biggest opportunity. Because remember what I said, change only happens in two ways. And the most effective and fastest way to change is the one where you're coming away from pain and from ego death. So if you're going through that hard time, it's your opportunity to use that as a way to say, you know what, this is just absolutely shit. I need to completely reinvent myself and do something, and this just cannot stand. And you need to really hate this current situation, because that fear of returning to that, right, and the certainty that you have that that's not what you want, is the same engine that you use to propel yourself to a different direction. Like, it was the conviction that I had that the PhD was not my path. That was this same conviction that I had to stick through YouTube in the early stages when nobody was watching my videos. I think I won't labor this point. It's quite self-explanatory. But then there's an extra idea in this. It's like, I went into the fear when I went into the military, right? And I didn't go into the fear, but I was forced to face my biggest fear when I was cheated on. So there's a common theme where I kept saying ego death. I said ego death, right? So there's a certain element in this type of change where there's a death of your current self. And that means that your current personality and your current beliefs and all these things that you hold, some of it has to give way. And most people don't want to do this. They want all their past friends to still like them. They want the same relationships, non-conflictual relationships with their family. They want the same like little things that they want. Like, they want to have the cake and eat it too, while making the amazing New Year resolution changes that develops the new you. You can't have both. There's an element of ego death where certain relationships will change. You will lose your past friends, or you may even go through big like restructuring of friendships, locations. Just these kinds of shifts, the change that I'm talking about in the drastic realm, these are radical changes where you will go through some pain, shame even, and embarrassment and suffering, or feeling like you're cringe, feeling like you don't fit in, feeling like you're behind. And it's all of that just sucking that you go through in order to make it out the other side. That's the first way to change. Okay? So if you're in the shits, use it and realize this is your God-given opportunity. And life usually throws you these lemons, like these massive just shits. Like maybe you got fired from a job or something, right? It's just these one of these massive pains that life is actually serving up to you so that you can become the next iteration of yourself. And just before I move on to the next point, you actually want that. You want life to throw you these curveballs, because if you've ever met a guy that's like just, you know, these kind of guys that like the biggest like painful story they have is like they got so drunk or something, like, and every time they had a semi big problem, like some dad or mom came and paid them, financially solved it, or they always had a connection that would solve it, and they just had like an easy life that's like a calm sea. But these guys, when you meet them, they're not as grounded or resonant or confident in the same way as someone you meet that's been through a bigger wave of ups and downs, of greater pains and greater pleasures. It's in fact how deep your pain goes which will almost determine how high your peaks go as well, right? For the same reasons that I just described in the first part of this video. So instead of asking and getting angry, even though you will do this, like, why is this happening to me? Why does my life suck? Like, why can't I have it easy like Tom and Jerry? It's like, okay, you know, Tom and Jerry have it easy, but they don't have good stories to tell, right? When they look back on their life, it's not like a movie, right? It's not as good. And they don't have the breadth of emotional wisdom to cope with a lot of life's challenges that come by. This is why a lot of these guys will turn to like drugs and things, and they'll run away from their problems, because when a big anxiety or a big problem comes, they don't have the emotional bank account and width and breadth and depth to handle and cope. But every time you've overcome a deep problem, you actually have build like emotional muscle. And that's what you're building right now if you're going through something crap. It's as much a video for myself as it is for other people. I hope some part of this resonates with you. And if you have other questions or thoughts or things that you'd like to discuss or want me to talk about, leave it below and I'll get to it. Cheers.